Welcome to Built for HubSpot, the series where we're exploring the stories of the companies investing in going deep in the HubSpot ecosystem and building a competitive advantage. Today, we're talking to Harris Kenny, the founder of OutboundSync. We get into all things from how we made the switch from being a solutions partner to an app partner in the HubSpot ecosystem, the maturity curve of your potential buyers and their awareness and sophistication with your solution, and what it takes to make the right bets as a bootstrap startup building in the HubSpot ecosystem. This series is presented by Ampersand, the deep integration platform that's enabling the best startups and AI agents to build deep product integrations with HubSpot and other tools that your customers are already using without managing maintenance and complexity at scale. Let's get into it.
We started as a solutions partner. So I was running a consulting company and doing sales consulting, fractional sales, revenue, I guess now what you would call go-to-market, GTM. And we had some customers had CRM, some didn't. Ended up encountering HubSpot over and over again and decided to join the HubSpot Partner Program. And we were offering HubSpot services, implementations, as well as outbound email, which is kind of funny because HubSpot was always built on inbound. And then people are like, hey, you're running these outbound campaigns. Can we get this data in the CRM? Basically, really straightforward. And I was all in on a solutions partner agency. We were tiering up. We were gold tier and growing, and things were going really well. I went to inbound, was getting really good support from our CAM at the time. And he encouraged us, Jake Basil, he encouraged me to think about building out OutboundSync. He felt like there was something interesting there. And, when I was working on this at the time, we support getting outbound data basically into HubSpot. And I'll go into a little bit more what that means. But at the time, the options weren't good. The sequencers that existed that our users were using, they didn't have integrations at all. And since then, not much has changed. And so basically the idea is like, if HubSpot is going to be the system of record, if you want to be able to have revenue attribution, if you want to be able to have a smooth handoff to the sales team, then you're going to need the type of scaled outreach that's happening in a tool like a Smart Lead or an Instantly or an Email Bison. You're going to need that data to be in HubSpot as well, so that you can do all of those things. And if you want to maintain block lists and suppression lists, you need HubSpot to talk back to those other tools too, so that if HubSpot has good data hygiene in it and it's enriched and it's current and it's got all the right information, then you want to be able to use lists in HubSpot to make sure that that is feeding a block list so that any activity that's happening off platform isn't going to those people. And then lastly, like from a compliance perspective, if you want to have tight filtering on what comes into HubSpot and or have a unified consent, opt-in, opt-out subscription type setting, again, like the two platforms, there needs to be a bidirectional sync between the platforms. So, as we were doing the campaigns, it kind of like these use cases or pain points emerged, and it felt like, okay, there's room for an app here. Started playing around, built something in make.com, and then saw a lot of interest, and then we kind of went from there. So that was kind of the genesis of OutboundSync, and it was really, really completely informed by the fact that we were a solutions partner. And so we were in the portal with customers, seeing how other apps worked, seeing how apps like Arrows worked, and then comparing that to other apps that we tried where the integrations were just really bad. And it was like, wow, like what is even the point of installing this app at all? And so seeing like, okay, there is a spectrum of quality here, and that's up to the developer to decide what kind of app they want to build. And that's when it felt like, okay, maybe there is an opportunity here. If we want to really focus on quality and building for this ecosystem, really deeply, then I think maybe there's a company here. Maybe at a minimum, maybe there's a product here.
You mentioned the demand that sort of felt like as you were building a little bit more product around this process, around some of the pain points, you started to feel sort of pull from the market. Was that pull primarily sort of HubSpot focused? Like we want to be able to do more in HubSpot? Or was it more from like, we need this functionality to run better outbound campaigns that are not in HubSpot? Which side do you think was sort of more of the factor in going deep on this?
Yeah. So, what was happening was that teams were, and still are, I really believe in the concept of the adoption curve. And I still think that from what we're working on, we're like nowhere near even close to the middle of the adoption curve. I think like our users are still ahead of overwhelming majority of the market, which is exciting because like there's growth to come. And I think that's true for it's like true of the HubSpot story in general, that HubSpot itself has a lot of room, I think, in the market to grow. But we were basically teams were like landing in spam. They're landing the spam folder. And it's like, okay, we need to use a different tool. And so they would find Smart Lead. And then they'd say, great, we're using Smart Lead, but we also use HubSpot and we want to get this stuff back in HubSpot. So, I mean, that was generally like the order of discovery. We're maybe misusing Sales Hub, or, I think you could argue like misusing Outreach or SalesLoft, tools that were not designed for how they were being used by users. I think like Outreach product, like team would say that. And I think like even the users would acknowledge like, this isn't like exactly, we're maybe pushing it beyond what it was designed for, or explicitly doing things it wasn't built to do.
Right. And just to sort of be clear on that point, that's sending outbound email from a tool that is not designed to send outbound email, right? It's intended,
Exactly.
HubSpot or one of these sales engagement type tools is designed to send email to contacts that you already have who have opted in, who know about you. Yeah.
And especially at scale. So if you're talking about emailing, like, I mean, literally 2 million people a month or something like that, it's not designed. Some of these tools are just not designed for that. So they would go find a tool that was designed for that. And then they would say, yeah, but I still need this data back in my system of record. I need to we need to phone home here. We need to get back. And so that was the opportunity to emerge. And then for us, like, we're a dedicated app, so we have a higher price point. I don't know what the exact breakdown is, but I think certainly many, if not majority of the apps in the HubSpot App Store or Marketplace are free. So it was already tough sledding being like, hey, this is a HubSpot app that you have to pay money for. And so we had to move up in terms of pricing into the like multiple hundreds of dollars a month so that we could make the unit economics of the business work. Because I mean, we're bootstrapped, we're a small team. And then in parallel, I'm running my solutions partner agency where I'm getting HubSpot implementation. I'm getting paid for selling HubSpot and I'm doing the implementation projects. They're multiple month, 4 to 5 figure contracts. And so then in parallel to be like, okay, well, now I'm going to go try to sell a single seat of OutboundSync for a couple $100s a month. It was really difficult to try to navigate that as an app developer. Just the economics of that was really tricky for a little bit. But so we bundled it. So look, these are our services and we use our app. And that was how we got a user base going. And then people started saying, hey, we don't actually want your services. We just want the app. And that was kind of a new era for the company of like, okay, great. You just want our product. That's great. Doesn't hurt my feelings at all. It's no problem. That's exciting to hear that you want that. And so that was kind of a new era of, okay, now how do we support product only? And that was also tricky. And then slowly kind of made the transition over where now we're a full dedicated software company. We do not provide any services at all. Definitely majority of our income is HubSpot ecosystem and HubSpot users. And then kind of here we are today. Team of 3, we've got an engineer, we've got a CSM, we've got myself. We ourselves obviously use HubSpot. We're using our own product every day. We run our own outbound campaigns and things like that too.
Yeah, I think that transition from full services provider to sort of software company with that transition period where you're doing both is really interesting. I'm curious that you mentioned on the adoption curve, and for folks who don't know, you have a great article that we'll link here, but as you're shifting away from you running the services using your own product to others not wanting that service and wanting to do it themselves, have you found that they're doing it themselves because they're an agency providing that service to others? They hired an in-house team to go run that motion. Certainly, as you move up the maturity curve, it is a pretty specialized, sophisticated role. How have you found that be from a the user base of OutboundSync perspective?
Yeah, definitely. So if you go to our site, outboundsync.com, there's like a resources page. If you go to that, we've got an article that I just published called The Outbound Maturity Curve, and developed from early conversations that I had with you some time ago. And then it took a little time for us to kind of like flesh it out. But I'm really proud of what it is right now. And basically the idea is like we've got like 5 levels of maturity of an outbound function within an organization. And level 1 being not doing any outbound basically, and level 5 being a really sophisticated machine with feedback loops and dynamic enrichment and multiple vendors and multiple channels. It starts to get pretty cool what some teams are doing. And for us, it was this process of like moving into like smaller and smaller parts of the Venn diagram for us to find a toehold to exist in the marketplace. So it's like you had to be using HubSpot and Smart Lead. And so like HubSpot has hundreds of thousands of customers, but Smart Lead has like tens of thousands. So now of the tens of thousands of Smart Lead customers, some percentage of those are using HubSpot. And then you also have to care about these problems enough, revenue attribution, opt-outs and activity syncing for sales rep handoffs. You have to care about those problems enough that you're willing to pay extra to solve them. And so now it's like, okay, now the Venn diagram is even smaller, because that means basically you've got like some sales reps, basically. And so, most of the market isn't there. And so what we have found is that working with agencies has been a huge unlock for us. Some people, I think, talk about agencies as like a stepping stone, like, oh yeah, we like worked through some agencies, we found some traction, and now we're moving on. And like for us, like I fundamentally disagree with that. I think agencies, I mean, maybe it's my bias because I previously ran one, but I think they have like highly specialized knowledge. I think their role is not simply to like do things that people don't care about. I think people who run agencies are like really care about their craft, and they have really particular insight about how things work. And so like for us, we found partnering with the best agencies was the way to get in the door with these customers. And so like we eliminated the smart lead requirement, basically. And these were companies that were wanting to move up that outbound maturity curve up to like a level 3 or a level 4, which around that level, what you're talking about is like having multiple domains, using multiple data providers, using AI and dynamic personalization, things that like are not easy to pick up right away, using tools like Clay. And so companies that had resources, that had teams that were on. So now we're kind of like shifting back over to the HubSpot side of the diagram again. Whereas before, like a lot of times we were like marketing within the Smart Lead community, which I love, but there were power users within Smart Lead. And so it's like, oh, we don't need to convince every Smart Lead user. And if we can work with the power users, with the agencies, and then they're focused back over on the HubSpot side of the diagram, that can be our wedge in, where they are doing the best work. So they're finding the fastest growing companies that are running the most advanced HubSpot instances with the most automation, and they want the workflows, and they want timeline events, and they want lists, and they want reporting and dashboards. Then it kind of like started to come into place a little bit, because they were doing the best work, they found the best clients, and then they said, yeah, by the way, we use this tool called Smart Lead. Don't worry about it, but it's how we're landing in the inbox, and it's how we're doing all this cool stuff. And the clients are like, yeah, whatever. We want lead generation. We want meetings. So sounds great. We trust you. Pick the best tool. So that was kind of how we went from like initially positioning to, I guess, like modifying the positioning a little bit over time.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a ton of sense, and I think it's really interesting to sort of transition into the go-to-market for RevOps, some of the things that have worked in the HubSpot ecosystem that are maybe like non-obvious. If you're a SaaS company that is selling a product and you don't care about ecosystems, even just the point that you're like slicing a slice of a slice to get to the intersection of folks. And I mean, even within HubSpot, we have this at Arrows, obviously, like if you sell a tool which is only for a specific hub, or mostly used if you use a specific hub, you maybe eliminate a large percentage of that, 240,000 HubSpot customers off the bat. So let's get into the sort of go-to-market motion a little bit. Like, what are some of the things that have worked for you, or what are you sort of doubling down on, or would like suggest as like, this is an area to push that's specific to the HubSpot ecosystem?
Yeah, well, I mean, I spent time really building some deep things inside of HubSpot that take time to understand and read through the API documentation and take advantage of things like timeline events. We're working on UI cards now. And so it's like getting to know the platform. There's a lot of stuff that if you build for HubSpot that it enables, but it's not obvious. And if you look at the way most apps work, they're just not doing those things. They're not taking the time to do that. Integration for them is one of many priorities. And if you're looking at your product roadmap and it's like rocks, paper, scissors, shoot kind of thing, the integration, like, it's rock and it keeps losing to build this other feature on our platform kind of thing. And so for us, because we're fundamentally an integration tool, that's not the case, right? Like the building deep of the platform does win, because that's why people buy our product. But I think that even companies that don't make an integration tool like us can learn from that. And it can be the edge that can cause a product to be selected, and especially if it's a competitive space, going that like one extra layer deep, I think can make a difference, because a savvy HubSpot admin will get it. They'll be like, oh, yep, got it. Because you built that, I can do this. Like there's like a very quick, in a single screenshot, they can see all the like integration filter properties that they could select from a timeline event and know that what they'll be able to do with it. And then for them, it gets really obvious. And so what I found that like a lot of times an admin, RevOps admin, super admin, and this is true in Salesforce and in HubSpot, a lot of times what I'm finding is like their job is veto more than anything else. And so because they're kind of the guardian of the CRM and they're the guardian of the system. And sometimes that includes security requirements and things like that, right? But other times it's just like, how deep does this go and what can it What does it do? What access does it have? What permissions is it requesting? Is it requesting for like excessive scope and things like that? You need to build for the immediate like use case. So for us, it's like we're generating leads. We need to see the leads. We need to track the leads, and then we want to not email people we shouldn't email. So it's like that's obviously the problem. Those are the problems that we're solving. But if we can build it deeply and thoughtfully in a way that when the like other person gets looped in and they're on that call and they look at the screen, they're like, "Yep, looks good to me." That's all you need from that person. They're not the end customer buyer, but they have it's their job to say no to things that will throw off, the rest of everything else that's going on within the organization. So yeah, going those extra layers deep and like really focusing on the ecosystem and what has been provided for you as an app developer, I do think that's a way to actually accelerate your revenue within an ecosystem. Because like for us, like my focus is like how quickly, if we're going to build a new integration, how quickly can we be getting paid by users of those tools? So because like we're not venture backed, we don't have tens of millions of dollars to burn. If we invest in engineering or something, we need to get money back relatively soon. It needs to be validated in market. And so like one of the ways to do that is to do it the right way. So if you're thinking about like building a HubSpot app for the first time, if you're a bigger company, you need to think about like what would a HubSpot user actually want to, to make the case for it. Or if you're a new app developer, kind of the same thing. So by going a little deeper, you can get money faster because people will be like, oh, okay, cool. And maybe that means like starting narrow and just nailing one thing. And then, okay, here's where we're going next, where we're going next, where we're going next. Like it's like associations. We log associations up to the company object. There's like a lot of little things that we're doing that when you show people, they get it. And they're like, okay, yeah. And then therefore they have a willingness to pay because they know it's saving them time. We can talk about Supered next because Supered fits into that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are like that are, to your point, if you do less better or less deeper, there's lots of advantages. And I think it's interesting you're talking primarily about sort of speed to revenue on the front side of a deal, right? Like how quickly can we get that or like avoid the no from somebody who would otherwise block a deal? I think there's interesting opportunities too when you go deep on what HubSpot gives you as an app developer to increase expansion, increase retention. And I think this is a unusual way of approaching things if you are not sort of approaching things through an ecosystem lens, right? It's like the advantage of a timeline event in HubSpot isn't just that somebody can, use that timeline event directly in a workflow or in reporting or whatever. It's like you open up the surface area or the potential for more people to see your product in HubSpot. As you mentioned, great sort of segue into Supered, because one of the things that I talk about with folks a lot is like, what do you enable in HubSpot? Like, what is the thing that somebody can do because of your app inside of HubSpot? And you have sort of a pretty interesting approach to like helping accelerate that for folks. Because a lot of apps you install and it's like, oh, you're right. The data might be here from this app, but now I have to go build something. I have to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, totally.
How do you sort of shortcut that loop?
Yeah, I mean, Supered has been a big part of that, right? So Supered.io, we use Supered's packages feature as an app partner to pre-build lists, workflows, and reports. And so if I say, listen, if you're running outbound and you want to be able to attribute that outbound to revenue, you need a report. Well, we built the report for you. Here it is. And so from a single link, they can install a Chrome extension, deploy that report in that entire dashboard. We have a dashboard with like 30 different reports in it. They can deploy that whole thing. And because we're using webhooks as well, a user could, if they sit down and focused in under an hour, they could have their outbound campaigns syncing fully into HubSpot with all the activities and everything like that, and then piping right into reports and be able to track the full activity set and then any conversion that happens on those contacts in under an hour. And then also have workflows that are triggering like call tasks for the reps to follow up on replies and things like that. And so Supered enables that in a way that's really, really powerful. So yeah, I mean, you want people to actually use the application, to actually use the data. I think for us, our first problem was like the data layer. And now what's happening is we're finding that our data, because we did it in a way that's really conscientious of how HubSpot works and the HubSpot's data model, what we're finding is that our integration is forward compatible. As new features come out, I'll like refresh the UI in HubSpot and be like, oh yeah, turns out OutboundSync supports the all-bound timeline. I don't even know what the all-bound timeline is. I've never even heard of it. But because how we're logging that email activity and we looked at all the options in the API docs and we did it the right way, yeah, apparently we support that now, which is cool. So I do think HubSpot does a good job if you follow the docs as they ship things. Like we have found that, and that's been pretty nice. And that is not necessarily typical of every platform. Definitely not. And I think they're surfacing more ways also. Like they're adding more ways within the application to sort of like find, oh, an app does this an app solves this problem. You know, and so that I think is where I think things are getting potentially interesting in a way that HubSpot does that is not, again, not typical for other CRMs. And I think it's a really good step for the platform and for app developers because it gives you better visibility and distribution.
I'm curious sort of on that note that, if you're building it the right way, if you're investing the time in the integration, how much time do you find and sort of maybe building it the right way mitigates a lot of this, but like what's the sort of upfront cost of integration versus like ongoing, HubSpot changed something, we need to think about how, a new approach to this. You're always in a dynamic environment when you have an integration with something, right? Like anything can change at any point. Like how do you sort of account for that in planning and like road mapping?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, if you look at these iPaaS tools, these like integration platform as a service tools, that's kind of their main selling point. Like, oh, we'll take care of that for you. I think there are some really cool teams shipping some really cool solutions there, but I am a little skeptical of the pitch. What I've found is that like the details matter. And like a lead in HubSpot is not the same thing as a lead in Salesforce. And if you are not talking to users and you're not understanding the like relationship between the lead and the rest of the data model in HubSpot and or Salesforce, and you decide to like move between them and you kind of look at them interchangeably, like you're going to have problems. I think it's possible to use an iPaaS and not have these issues. Definitely, like of course it's possible, but like the connection is one thing, maintaining it is another, understanding the context is another, right? Like there's like, so yeah, I mean, and this is, I kind of like chuckle when I see people being like, I built, this week it's DocuSign. I built DocuSign in 17 minutes with cursor and whatever. It's like, that is cool, but it's like, that's never been the moat. I mean, that's not the reason why Airbnb is Airbnb. Like Airbnb's site is very simple. Craigslist's website is very simple. I mean, that's not historically, I mean, yes, occasionally companies come around and their technology is their moat.
Dropbox is an FTP server, right? Like,
totally. Right. Yeah, it's a great example. So it's like, I mean, there's other reasons why people buy things and use things, and integrations are part of that. So yeah, I do think that like maintaining over time matters. Those things change over time. That's like a non-trivial thing. And I think that there are some iPaaS solutions that will be better enabling for that than others. Others I've seen are like very thin, and I've talked to other founders who have been like, hey, we're working on a HubSpot integration and we tried out these 2 different other tools and they didn't give us what we needed. So, I would say like, you just gotta look into that a little bit. But regardless, if you do it on your own or if you'd use one of these tools, like you're going to have to spend some time getting to know the platform. And I think if you asked anybody at any of these other tools, they would tell you that. And some of them may make it easier, and they may speed up some things for you. I think for us, because it's so core to what we do, it didn't make sense. But that doesn't mean it's not a good approach. Like it just depends on what you're doing.
For sure. And I think that's a great point. That like the context matters, the nuance of the ecosystem matters, because everybody's trying to do things slightly differently, and each tool, everybody wants to use it slightly differently, and the sort of the devil's in the details of those kinds of things.
Yeah, so I mean, Salesforce, I mean, like we went the first few months of like Salesforce and like nobody's using lead object, and then all of a sudden like we just had like, but now we're moving up in the Salesforce ecosystem, and bigger Salesforce companies are now reaching out, and they're like, yep, we need that. And then like yesterday, like, oh, actually, we want to go right to opportunity. I'm like, okay, we got to build that too. Which like, I mean, it's totally, they explain their use case, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And I think that like Salesforce is much, much more complicated than HubSpot. There's just so many more things that are possible, and just like little weird stuff that how Salesforce uses the task activity as like a catch-all for a lot of different things that I didn't fully understand before. Like there's no equivalent exactly one-to-one match for timeline events in Salesforce. But like tasks kind of perform like a multi-functional, like a Swiss Army knife kind of thing. So, once you get in it, then you talk to more users, and then you'll start seeing like, oh, okay, well, there's more here that people want. And so like, it's not a one and done thing. You're going to ship the integration, and then users are going to start using it, and then they're going to have feedback. And whether it's maintenance or going deeper, like what's going to happen on most engineering teams is like, okay, we don't want to think about HubSpot again for like 6 months. We just worked on it for the last couple sprints. Like we're done. Right. It's like, no, because now you have users and they're expecting, right. Even if it's not new features.
By itself.
Yeah, right. They're like, well, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do that? Which like you have to be up for that. Otherwise you shouldn't build it, right? Because like, of course a user would want to use your product, which is like what they're asking for, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a great way of putting it. I think that's helpful sort of consideration for folks. So last question for you. For somebody who is, and maybe I think you sort of have an interesting perspective as you mentioned, just sort of relatively recently made the shift to also supporting other ecosystems. For somebody who's sort of not in the HubSpot ecosystem or doesn't have an app integration, whatever the sort of current state is, what would be the sort of piece of advice or the model that you would have them go through to sort of figure out, like, is this a bet that's worth making for me? Like, what was sort of your framework on, both sort of all in on HubSpot, or sort of, the first starting point being with just HubSpot to, something beyond that?
Yeah. I mean, we're bootstrapped, right? So that like informs how we think about the market and the world and what we do. For us, the question is like, are there users already who have this problem? Do you have users already on HubSpot who would like to do things better or differently? The reason why we started building Salesforce in the first place is that we found users were using HubSpot's Salesforce data sync to get the data into Salesforce. I got a customer service ticket with a screenshot of a contact record in Salesforce, and they were like, "Hey, why is this happening?" I mean, I was like, well, what are you talking about? How did you even get that in there? And they're like, "Oh, well, we bought your HubSpot and we bought the HubSpot integration, but just to put it into Salesforce. And here's how we're doing that." And it was like, "Oh, okay." And we had like quite a few users who were doing that before I even knew it. Like they never asked, we never talked about it. It just sort of happened. And so that's what like led us into building for Salesforce. And so I would say with like an ecosystem investment, ideally there should be something there already. Like I'm not building for whatever random like CRM for architects or something like that, because I'm sure there's a lot of great architects out there and they probably have a great CRM option, or maybe they use HubSpot, I don't know. But you have to look for the users. Like what's come up for us on a few calls is actually Snowflake, like up market, people saying, actually, I want to send this to the data warehouse first, and then from Snowflake I want to push down to HubSpot. And that's come up enough times now where I'm like, huh. And then they explain their use case and they're like, okay, yeah, that actually makes sense. So for me, because we're bootstrapped, we think about it incrementally. We place smaller bets. It's like, what's the Billy Bean thing? The Oakland A's where they would do the Moneyball, It's like we're hitting singles and doubles. We're not swinging for the fences. So like when we write code, it needs to work. When we write docs, people need to read them. When we onboard someone, we want to retain that customer. It is not like a high stakes, bet a lot, win a lot, but probably lose everything kind of thing for our business right now based on the nature of what the business is. And so that's my bias. But I would say like see what the users are and what they're asking for and make sure that there's value, and then know that you can probably stretch them, but there has to be like an existing something there, and then you can stretch them and help them use it. I would say many of our users don't take advantage of our pre-built reports and workflows. And so now we're kind of shifting into education mode and trying to expand that use case and do more. But in the beginning, it was just like, does anybody care about this? I can worry about them making the most of it later, but like, do they care at all?
Yeah.
And then we checked that box, and now it's like, okay, let's become part of let's become an essential tool for them in HubSpot. So.
Great place to leave it. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Built for HubSpot podcast. If you like this show, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, follow us on YouTube, or subscribe to Built for HubSpot on Substack. I'll see you in the next episode.